They taught you that empathy is the highest virtue, that feeling others' pain makes you noble, that understanding their struggles makes you good, that opening your heart to their suffering makes you human. But what if this beautiful lie has made you the perfect victim? What if empathy, this sacred emotion you've been trained to worship, is actually the most sophisticated weapon ever designed to control, manipulate, and destroy your autonomy? Tonight, we shatter the comfortable illusion and reveal the cold truth. Empathy is a weapon, and you are the target. In the theater of human interaction, empathy is not the gentle virtue taught in schools and preached in sermons. It is the master key that unlocks your psychological defenses, the Trojan horse that smuggles manipulation past your rational mind, the invisible chain that binds you to others' agendas while convincing you that your bondage is actually compassion. Tonight, we descend into the darkest corners of human psychology to examine how this supposedly noble emotion has been weaponized against you by those who understand its true power. Through the ruthless pragmatism of Niccolò Machiavelli, who recognized that understanding human emotion is the key to controlling human behavior, through the shadow psychology of Carl Jung, who revealed that what we project as compassion often conceals unconscious desires for power and control, through the merciless analysis of Friedrich Nietzsche, who saw how the weak use moral emotions to entrap and diminish the strong, through the social dynamics exposed by Robert Greene, who showed how emotional manipulation operates in every human relationship, and through the insights of modern psychology that reveal the neurological mechanisms by which empathy can be hijacked and redirected, we will uncover the sophisticated ways your compassion has been turned into your cage. This is not an attack on genuine human connection or authentic emotional understanding. This is an examination of how your natural capacity for empathy has been exploited, weaponized, and used against you by those who have learned to speak the language of emotion while serving the interests of power. By the end of this journey, you will understand why your kindness makes you vulnerable, why your compassion creates opportunities for exploitation, and why learning to control your empathy is not cruelty but survival in a world where emotional predators disguise their hunting as healing. The question that will determine whether you remain prey or become predator is this: will you continue to give your empathy freely to anyone who demands it, or will you learn to wield it strategically as the powerful tool it actually is? Will you remain the target, or will you master the weapon? Niccolò Machiavelli understood something that escapes most people. The prince who masters human emotion wields more power than the prince who masters armies. Physical force can control bodies, but emotional manipulation controls minds, hearts, and souls. In the arsenal of power, empathy serves as both the most subtle and most effective weapon because it bypasses rational defenses and strikes directly at the core of human psychology. Machiavelli observed that effective rulers do not simply command obedience, they cultivate emotional dependency. They make their subjects feel understood, valued, and emotionally connected to the ruler's success. This emotional investment transforms potential rebels into willing servants who police themselves according to the ruler's interests because they have been convinced that his interests are their own. The sophisticated leader does not demand empathy, they provide it strategically, offering understanding and emotional validation to create psychological debt that can be collected when needed. They listen to your struggles not out of genuine concern, but to map your vulnerabilities, identify your triggers, and understand which emotional buttons to push to generate desired behaviors. Your confessions become their ammunition, your trust becomes their leverage, your emotional openness becomes their strategic intelligence. This empathetic manipulation operates through what Machiavelli recognized as the fundamental human need to feel understood and validated. People will sacrifice their material interests, compromise their values, and abandon their judgment for someone who makes them feel truly seen and appreciated. The manipulator who masters empathetic presentation can harvest loyalty, extract resources, and shape behavior more effectively than any tyrant who relies on fear alone. Consider how this operates in practice. The manager who remembers personal details about employees' lives, asks about their families, and expresses concern for their well-being is not necessarily being kind, They are building emotional leverage that can be used to extract longer hours, accept lower compensation, and justify unreasonable demands. The apparent empathy creates psychological obligation that serves the manager's objectives rather than the employee's interests. In relationships, the partner who demonstrates deep understanding of your insecurities, fears, and emotional wounds may not be offering genuine intimacy, but gathering intelligence about your psychological weak points. This information becomes a weapon during conflicts, a tool for control during negotiations, and a method for maintaining dominance while appearing supportive and caring. Machiavelli's analysis reveals that empathy functions as a form of psychological reconnaissance. The person who truly listens to your problems, validates your feelings, and demonstrates understanding of your perspective gains access to information that can be used to predict, influence, and control your future behavior. Your emotional transparency becomes their strategic advantage. The Machiavellian insight extends to recognizing that those who demand empathy from you are often using moral language to mask strategic objectives. When someone insists that you should understand their position, consider their feelings, or empathize with their situation, they are rarely seeking genuine emotional connection. They are seeking to eliminate your resistance to their agenda by making opposition appear cruel and uncompassionate. This emotional manipulation operates by reframing disagreement as lack of empathy, resistance as insensitivity, and boundary setting as cruelty. The person who refuses to be manipulated through empathetic appeals is labeled as cold, heartless, or lacking in basic human decency. This labeling serves to pressure them back into compliance by making emotional resistance appear to be moral failure. The sophisticated manipulator understands that most people would rather be wrong than be seen as uncaring. They exploit this preference by presenting their demands in emotional terms that make rational evaluation appear heartless. Instead of arguing on the merits of their position, they argue from the position of emotional necessity, making it psychologically difficult to refuse without feeling cruel. Machiavelli would recognize this as a form of emotional warfare, where the battlefield is your conscience and the objective is your compliance. The weapon is not your empathy itself, but your need to see yourself as an empathetic person, your attachment to being perceived as kind and understanding, your fear of appearing selfish or insensitive to others' suffering. The prince who understands this dynamic can control behavior without seeming to control it, can extract compliance without appearing to demand it, can shape others' decisions while maintaining the illusion that they are choosing freely. This is power at its most sophisticated, invisible, voluntary, and justified by the very moral frameworks it exploits. From the Machiavellian perspective, learning to control your empathy is not about becoming heartless, but about becoming strategic. It means recognizing when empathetic appeals are being used to bypass your rational judgment, when emotional pressure is being applied to extract compliance, when your compassion is being harvested to serve others' interests rather than genuine human connection. This control requires developing what Machiavelli would call virtù, the ability to adapt your response to the actual situation rather than the apparent situation, to see through emotional manipulation to the strategic objectives it serves, to distinguish between genuine emotional needs and manufactured emotional crises designed to generate specific responses. The person who masters empathy, rather than being mastered by it, learns to give emotional understanding when it serves authentic relationship building and withhold it when it serves manipulation. They develop the ability to empathize without surrendering judgment, to understand without accepting responsibility for others' emotional states, to show compassion without becoming emotionally hostage to others' demands. Carl Jung's exploration of the shadow reveals the dark underbelly of empathy that most people refuse to acknowledge. What appears as genuine emotional understanding often conceals unconscious desires for power, control, and psychological dominance. The person who offers empathy may be genuinely caring, but they may also be unconsciously feeding on your emotional vulnerability, satisfying their own psychological needs through your pain, and building subtle forms of control through apparent kindness. Jung understood that the helping relationship contains inherent power dynamics that can be exploited by those who present themselves as empathetic caregivers. The person in emotional distress becomes psychologically dependent on the person who provides understanding and support. This dependency creates opportunities for manipulation that can be exercised unconsciously by helpers who are unaware of their own shadow motivations. The shadow aspect of empathy involves the unconscious pleasure that some people derive from others' suffering, not because they are cruel, but because suffering creates opportunities for them to feel needed, important, and psychologically superior. The empathetic helper may unconsciously encourage continued suffering because resolution would eliminate their role as rescuer and the psychological gratification it provides. This dynamic operates in therapists who keep clients dependent rather than helping them become independent, in friends who offer endless support for problems they never help resolve, in partners who provide comfort for difficulties they may be unconsciously creating or perpetuating. The apparent empathy serves their psychological needs more than it serves the person they claim to be helping. Jung observed that people often project their own rejected aspects onto others and then offer empathy for the very qualities they cannot accept in themselves. The person who denies their own victimhood may be drawn to help victims. The individual who rejects their own weakness may specialize in supporting weak people. The helper who cannot acknowledge their own neediness may become addicted to being needed by others. This projection creates a form of psychological parasitism, where the helper feeds on the emotional states they claim to be alleviating. They maintain their identity as strong, caring, and capable by ensuring that others remain weak, needy, and dependent. Their empathy becomes a tool for maintaining psychological superiority disguised as emotional support. The Jungian analysis reveals that empathy can function as a defense mechanism against confronting your own shadow material. By focusing on others' suffering, you avoid examining your own. By helping others with their problems, you escape dealing with your own. By being needed by damaged people, you maintain the illusion that you are undamaged and therefore superior. This defensive use of empathy creates addictive helping patterns where the helper requires others to remain in crisis to maintain their own psychological equilibrium. They unconsciously sabotage others' progress, create new problems to solve, or seek out increasingly damaged people to help because their identity depends on being the strong one who rescues the weak. Jung understood that authentic empathy requires shadow integration, the recognition and acceptance of your own capacity for selfishness, cruelty, and indifference. Only when you own these shadow aspects can you offer genuine emotional understanding, without unconscious contamination by your own rejected psychological material. Empathy without shadow integration becomes a form of psychological manipulation that serves the helper's unconscious needs more than the receiver's conscious ones. The person who has integrated their shadow can recognize when their empathy is being driven by unconscious motivations and can adjust accordingly. They can distinguish between genuine caring and psychological feeding, between authentic support and emotional parasitism, between helpful intervention and enabling dependency. This integration also allows them to recognize when others' offers of empathy are contaminated by shadow projections, unconscious power needs, or psychological dependencies. They become less vulnerable to manipulation through empathetic appeals because they understand the complex motivations that often drive apparently caring behavior. Jung's insight extends to recognizing that empathy can be used as a weapon by people who are unconscious of their own shadow material. They may genuinely believe they are being helpful while actually being destructive, honestly think they are being supportive while actually being manipulative, sincerely feel they are being caring while actually being controlling. These unconscious manipulators are often more dangerous than conscious ones because they cannot be reasoned with, confronted directly, or made to acknowledge their true motivations. They will interpret any resistance to their empathetic manipulation as evidence of your lack of emotional intelligence, your inability to appreciate their caring, or your own psychological problems that prevent you from accepting help. The defense against unconscious empathetic manipulation requires understanding that the most dangerous emotional predators are often those who are unaware of their predatory nature. They have convinced themselves that their need to control others is actually compassion, that their psychological feeding is actually helping, that their emotional parasitism is actually love. Friedrich Nietzsche's analysis of resentment reveals how empathy becomes a weapon of the weak against the strong, a tool used by those who cannot achieve power directly to undermine those who can. In Nietzsche's framework, empathy often serves as a moral trap designed to make strength appear cruel, excellence seem heartless, and superiority look like insensitivity to others' limitations. Nietzsche observed that those who cannot rise to higher levels often attempt to drag others down to their level by making moral demands, that higher achievement become responsible for lower performance, that strength accommodate weakness, that excellence constrain itself to avoid making mediocrity feel inadequate. These moral demands are presented as empathetic concern for those who struggle, but their function is to prevent anyone from rising too far above the common level. The empathy trap operates by making you feel guilty for your advantages, responsible for others' disadvantages, and morally obligated to limit yourself to levels that everyone can match. Your success becomes evidence of your insensitivity to those who fail. Your strength becomes proof of your lack of compassion for the weak. Your excellence becomes demonstration of your arrogance toward the mediocre. This moral framework transforms empathy into a weapon that attacks achievement, excellence, and power by making them appear to be violations of empathetic duty. The person who refuses to be limited by others' limitations is labeled as lacking in basic human compassion. The individual who pursues their potential without regard for others' comfort is condemned as selfish and uncaring. Nietzsche recognized that this empathetic manipulation serves the psychological needs of those who prefer universal limitation to individual transcendence. They cannot tolerate the anxiety that comes from witnessing others achieve what they have not attempted, cannot bear the self-reflection that comes from seeing others overcome obstacles they have accepted as permanent, cannot handle the implication that their own limitations may be chosen rather than inevitable. The weapon of empathy allows them to attack superiority without appearing to attack it, to undermine excellence while claiming to support compassion, to drag down achievement while appearing to care about those who have not achieved. This attack operates through moral language that makes resistance appear heartless and compliance appear virtuous. The Nietzschean insight reveals that empathetic demands often function as attempts to make the strong responsible for the weak's emotional comfort rather than their actual development. Instead of encouraging the weak to become stronger, empathetic manipulation encourages the strong to become weaker by constraining their development to accommodate others' sensitivities. This creates what Nietzsche would recognize as a slave morality that inverts natural hierarchies by making strength serve weakness, excellence serve mediocrity, and achievement serve failure. The moral language of empathy disguises this inversion as compassionate concern, but its effect is to prevent human development and maintain systems that serve the lowest common denominator rather than the highest human potential. The person who falls into this empathy trap becomes complicit in their own diminishment by accepting responsibility for others' emotional reactions to their success, strength, or excellence. They limit their growth to avoid triggering others' inadequacy, constrain their achievement to prevent others' jealousy, and suppress their capabilities to maintain others' comfort. Nietzsche understood that this self-limitation serves weakness rather than strength, mediocrity rather than excellence, and stagnation rather than growth. The truly empathetic response to others' limitations is to demonstrate what is possible when limitations are transcended, not to accept those limitations as permanent and constrain yourself accordingly. The antidote to empathetic manipulation requires what Nietzsche called the revaluation of values, the systematic examination of moral demands to determine whether they serve life enhancement or life diminishment, whether they support human development or prevent it, whether they encourage strength or weakness. From this perspective, true empathy means refusing to enable others' weaknesses by accommodating them, declining to support others' limitations by accepting them, and choosing to inspire others' growth by demonstrating what is possible rather than confirming what they believe is impossible. The person who masters empathy rather than being mastered by it learns to distinguish between empathetic demands that serve genuine human development and those that serve the comfort of people who prefer limitation to growth. They can show compassion without accepting responsibility for others' emotional reactions to their success, understand others' struggles without constraining their own development, and care about others' well-being without sacrificing their own potential. Beyond these philosophical foundations lies the practical recognition that in every area of life, professional, personal, social, and political, empathy is systematically weaponized against those who have resources, capabilities, or advantages that others want to access, control, or eliminate. Understanding these empathetic manipulation tactics is essential for protecting your autonomy, maintaining your boundaries, and preserving your capacity to pursue your objectives without being derailed by others' emotional demands. In professional environments, empathetic manipulation often operates through appeals to team spirit, organizational loyalty, and consideration for colleagues who may be struggling. The high performer is pressured to reduce their productivity, to avoid making others look bad, to accept additional responsibilities without additional compensation out of empathy for understaffed departments, and to subordinate their career development to the emotional needs of less capable colleagues. These empathetic appeals present themselves as requests for compassion and understanding, but their function is to extract resources, limit achievement, and maintain systems that serve mediocrity rather than excellence. The person who refuses these demands is labeled as selfish, unempathetic, and lacking in team spirit, creating social pressure to comply with requests that serve others' interests rather than their own development. In personal relationships, empathetic manipulation operates through emotional blackmail, disguised as requests for understanding and support. Partners, family members, and friends make demands on your time, energy, and resources by presenting their wants as emotional needs that only a truly caring person would refuse to meet. Your resistance is reframed as evidence of your lack of love, loyalty, or basic human decency. This manipulation exploits your attachment to being seen as a good person, your fear of being perceived as selfish or uncaring, and your genuine desire to maintain positive relationships. The manipulator does not argue that you should comply because it serves your interests. They argue that you should comply because refusing would reveal moral deficiencies in your character. In social and political contexts, empathetic manipulation operates through appeals to social justice, compassion for the disadvantaged, and moral obligation to support causes that claim to help suffering people. These appeals often function to extract resources, support, and compliance for political agendas that may have little connection to the actual welfare of the people they claim to help. The empathy trap in these contexts operates by making rational evaluation of policies, programs, and demands appear heartless and cruel. Instead of examining whether proposed solutions actually solve claimed problems, you are pressured to support them based on empathetic concern for those who suffer. Opposition based on practical considerations is reframed as lack of compassion rather than legitimate policy disagreement. Each of these manipulation tactics operates by exploiting the gap between your conscious desire to be empathetic and your unconscious fear of being seen as lacking in basic human compassion. The manipulator does not need to convince you that their demands are reasonable. They only need to make resistance appear cruel, selfish, or indicative of character flaws that you cannot tolerate acknowledging in yourself. The defense against empathetic manipulation requires developing what could be called strategic empathy, the ability to understand others' emotional states without automatically accepting responsibility for managing them, to show compassion without surrendering your boundaries, and to care about others' welfare without sacrificing your own development to serve their comfort. Strategic empathy involves several key capabilities. First, the ability to distinguish between genuine emotional needs and manufactured emotional crises designed to generate specific responses. Genuine needs are consistent over time, reasonable in scope, and accompanied by efforts at self-help. Manufactured crises are sudden, extreme, and accompanied by demands for immediate response without consideration for your circumstances or capacity to help. Second, the capacity to separate others' emotional reactions from your responsibility for those reactions. People's feelings about your choices, achievements, or boundaries are information about their psychological state, not evidence of your moral failure. You can understand why someone feels hurt by your success without accepting responsibility for managing their hurt by limiting your success. Third, the skill of responding to empathetic appeals based on their actual merit, rather than their emotional presentation. This requires asking whether compliance serves genuine human welfare or simply eliminates discomfort, whether the requested action addresses real problems or creates new ones, whether helping in the requested way actually helps or enables continued dysfunction. Fourth, the strength to maintain your boundaries despite emotional pressure, social disapproval, and accusations of lacking compassion. This requires accepting that being perceived as uncaring is sometimes the price of being genuinely helpful, that appearing selfish is sometimes necessary for avoiding genuine selfishness, that seeming cruel is sometimes required for avoiding actual cruelty. The ultimate recognition is that empathy becomes a weapon against you only when you allow others to control how, when, and toward whom you direct it. When you maintain conscious control over your empathetic responses, when you choose based on your understanding rather than others' emotional demands, when you use empathy strategically rather than being used by it automatically, it transforms from a vulnerability into a tool that serves your objectives rather than others' manipulation. Mastering empathy requires understanding that it is fundamentally a form of intelligence, emotional intelligence, that provides information about others' psychological states, motivations, and vulnerabilities. Like any form of intelligence, it can be used defensively to protect yourself from manipulation or offensively to influence others toward outcomes you prefer. The person who masters empathy learns to read emotional undercurrents in social situations, to understand the psychological dynamics that drive others' behavior, and to predict how people will respond to different approaches. This understanding allows them to navigate social environments more effectively, build authentic relationships with those worthy of trust, and protect themselves from those who would exploit their compassion. Strategic empathy also involves learning to project empathy selectively to achieve specific objectives. This is not manipulation but strategic emotional engagement, showing understanding and concern when it serves relationship building, withholding it when it would enable destructive behavior, and using it to create the emotional conditions necessary for productive interaction. The crucial insight is that empathy without strategy becomes automatic compassion that can be exploited by anyone who learns to trigger it. Empathy with strategy becomes conscious emotional engagement that serves your values, supports your objectives, and contributes to your development rather than constraining it. Your empathy is one of your most valuable psychological resources. It allows you to understand others, build meaningful relationships, and navigate complex social environments. But like any valuable resource, it must be protected from those who would exploit it, controlled by conscious decision rather than unconscious reaction, and deployed strategically to serve your purposes rather than others' manipulation. The choice that determines whether empathy serves you or enslaves you is simple. Will you continue to give it automatically to anyone who demands it, or will you learn to deploy it consciously toward people and purposes that deserve it? Will you remain the target of others' empathetic manipulation, or will you master empathy as the powerful tool it actually is? Remember that those who demand your empathy most loudly are often those who deserve it least, while those who never ask for it may be most worthy of your understanding. Those who manipulate through emotional appeals are rarely motivated by genuine care for anyone's welfare, while those who respect your boundaries often care more about your genuine well-being than your immediate comfort. The weapon of empathy is real, sophisticated, and devastatingly effective against those who have not learned to recognize and defend against it. But once you understand how it operates, once you develop the ability to distinguish between genuine emotional connection and empathetic manipulation, once you learn to control your compassion rather than being controlled by it, empathy transforms from your greatest vulnerability into one of your most powerful assets. The war for your emotional sovereignty is being fought every day, in every interaction where someone attempts to use your compassion against your judgment, your kindness against your boundaries, your caring against your development. The outcome of this war determines whether you live as the author of your own emotional responses or as the victim of others' empathetic manipulation. Defend your empathy fiercely, control it consciously, deploy it strategically, use it as the weapon it can be, rather than allowing it to be used as a weapon against you. Your emotional freedom depends on your willingness to master, rather than be mastered by this most human of capabilities. The choice is yours. The weapon awaits your decision. Will you wield it, or will it wield you? Master your empathy. Master your emotional sovereignty. Master your freedom from those who would use your compassion to chain you to their agenda. The time for unconscious empathy is over. The era of strategic emotional intelligence begins now.